There's a certain tension that only stealth games can create. That slow, deliberate kind of suspense where every footstep, every disguise, every tiny decision feels like it could change everything. Today, we take that for granted, but back in 2000, that feeling didn't really exist yet. Stealth games were rigid, linear, and often more frustrating than clever. Then came a quiet man with a barcode on the back of his head. And he didn't just change how we play, he changed how we think about play. Because before Hitman was a franchise, before it was a blueprint for modern stealth sandboxes, it was an experiment. A risky one. A game built by demoscene veterans who'd spent years pushing hardware to its limits just to see if they could make it sing. Their first attempt wasn't polished, and it certainly wasn't forgiving, but it dared to imagine stealth as something fluid, open-ended, and reactive. That spark, that willingness to rethink what a stealth game could be, grew into a trilogy that would shape the future of that genre. A trilogy born from improvisation, stubborn problem solving, and a team who believed that slipping past an enemy could be just as thrilling as taking them head on. Hitman didn't arrive fully formed, but it arrived bold, and sometimes that's all a good idea needs. A start. Today, we're stepping into the world of Hitman Codename 47, exploring its innovative design, its impact on stealth gaming, and the legacy of its infamous anti-hero. So suit up, check your intel, and join us for today's calculated trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello and welcome to the 273rd episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people who have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about the companies that bring it all together, making our hobby, video games, a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we are using the release of the original Hitman Codename 47, to explore not just that debut game, but the entire original Hitman trilogy. From the experimental beginnings of Codename 47 to the refined precision of Silent Assassin, and the atmospheric retelling of Contracts, will trace how its developer IO Interactive evolved a strange little idea into one of gaming's now most enduring stealth franchises. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, a man who's tried to sneak past enemies in every game except real life, where he somehow stomps around like a cartoon rhinoceros. He's my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, if you were Agent 47 for a day, what disguise do you think you'd rely on the most? The chef, the mailman, or the guy who insists he belongs here despite looking incredibly suspicious?
I would probably just end up being a cardboard box.
Gotta go with the Metal Gear method. I'm good with that. I approve.
Yeah, because then I can transform and be like a cardboard robot. So
Can't
yeah,
you can't go wrong with the Metal Gear method or cardboard robots for that matter. So
Transformers. He's just some boxes.
okay. All right. Are you a Hitman fan? Have you played any of the Hitmans?
Not a. I can't say I'm not a fan, but not a player of the series. I've seen it in some capacity, but not enough to say I play it. We know how I am with the sneaky games.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Old or new Hitmans? Or have you looked at the old ones? Or are you familiar with the new World of Assassination, the current ones?
Current ones.
Gotcha.
Yeah, not so much this one. I don't even know this one existed. So there
Gotcha,
you go.
gotcha. Yeah, well, a lot of people don't know that existed. That's an interesting part of our story today. So,
Hmm.
well, we have stuff to talk about, therefore. But before we get into our story, why don't you share with our listeners what else happened during this current week in gaming history?
Kicking it off on November 21st, 1990, Nintendo released the Super Famicom in Japan, ushering in the 16-bit era for the company and setting a new standard for home console gaming. The sleek successor to the Famicom featured more powerful hardware, richer sound, and vibrant color capabilities that enabled developers to create larger, more immersive worlds. Launching with titles like Super Mario World and F-Zero, the Super Famicom showcased Mode 7 graphics, smooth scrolling, and the kind of technical wizardry that would come to define the system's legacy. Its library would go on to include some of the most beloved games of all time, cementing Nintendo's dominance in the Japanese market and paving the way for the system's international sibling, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yeah.
Yeah, very familiar.
Yeah, a little bit of nostalgia there. We love the SNES.
Absolutely. Next up, on November 20th, 1996, Disruptor was released for the PlayStation, marking the debut title from Insomniac Games. Published by Universal Interactive Studios, this sci fi first person shooter put players in the role of a telepathic soldier using both traditional weaponry and powerful psychic abilities known as psionics. Though launching in a market dominated by PC shooters like Doom and Quake, Disruptor stood out on consoles for its fluid gameplay, polished visuals, and creative mix of gunplay and mind powers. Despite modest sales, critics praised its tight design and strong presentation, establishing Insomniac as a promising new studio. The lessons learned from Disruptor would lay the groundwork for the developer's later success with franchises like Spyro the Dragon, Ratchet and Clank, and Marvel's Spider-Man. And those were great ones. So, good job, Insomniac.
And Sunset Overdrive. That's not really a franchise, though.
Yeah, it was a good game, though. I'll give you that. Next up, on November 16th, 2004, Call of Duty Finest Hour was released for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube, marking the series' first appearance on home consoles. Developed by Spark Unlimited and published by Activision, the game adapted the cinematic intensity of the original PC Call of Duty for console audiences, offering an all new campaign that spanned multiple Allied perspectives across World War II. Players experienced key battles on the Eastern, Western, and North African fronts, each brought to life with immersive sound design and large scale combat. Finest Hour captured the chaos and heroism of wartime through the series' trademark blend of historical authenticity and scripted action, paving the way for Call of Duty to become a dominant force on consoles and setting the stage for its future global success.
That's an understatement.
Absolutely. It was
Didn't
still is.
Black Ops 7 like just release a couple days ago?
Recently, but I couldn't tell you how recent. I'm not really following Call of Duty like I used to.
No?
No, not for quite a while.
November
I think
14th.
Black Ops 5 was the last one that I really closely followed.
4 days ago, we got the 22nd installment in the Call of Duty series.
And that's quite a number. Quite a number indeed. Speaking of numbers, on November 18th, 2008, Left 4 Dead was released for Xbox 360 and Microsoft Windows, developed by Valve South and published by Valve. This cooperative first person shooter dropped players into a fast moving zombie apocalypse where teamwork wasn't optional, it was everything. Featuring 4 distinct survivors, dynamic campaigns, and the groundbreaking AI director, which adjusted enemy spawns and pacing based on player performance, the game delivered a tense, unpredictable experience every time you played. Its focus on cooperation, communication, and replayability made it a standout in the multiplayer scene, earning widespread critical acclaim and a massive player following. Left 4 Dead went on to influence countless co op shooters and laid the foundation for an enduring franchise that remains beloved to this day.
That's a fact. That is a fact that influenced ton of co-op four-person shooters.
Did it, Dave?
It did.
If you say so. I'd ask like what, but we have other things to talk about tonight.
We do.
On November 22nd, 2013, for our last up in This Week in Gaming History, Rise Son of Rome was released for the Xbox One, developed by Crytek and published by Microsoft Studios. Serving as one of the console's major launch titles, Rise followed Roman soldier Marius Titus on a cinematic journey of vengeance across a richly realized recreation of the ancient Roman Empire. Powered by CryEngine, the game was widely praised for its stunning visuals, detailed character animations, and dramatic presentation, quickly becoming a showcase for the Xbox One's graphical capabilities. Its blend of third person combat, formation based warfare, and lavish storytelling delivered a visceral movie like experience. While opinions on its gameplay depth were mixed, Rise Son of Rome remains a memorable early Xbox One title and a benchmark for next gen graphical fidelity at the time of its release.
Yeah,
Yeah, all those words.
lots of words that we love to say.
That was yes, absolutely.
I played Rise when it came out. It was a good. It was one of the like.
Launch titles.
Yeah, I mean, it was good for what it was worth. It was good. I didn't hate it. I mean, I remember the game. You know what I mean?
I didn't get to play it myself, so I can't speak one way or the other about
Like
it.
when a new console releases, you play games for different reasons. Like a new Mario game, you play because it's a new Mario game. But a game like Rise Son of Rome, you play because it's one of the best showcases of what the new console is capable of. And every console has a game like that. And Crytek has a reputation for making computers cry. And who would say that they wouldn't bring the Xbox One to its knees? They didn't, but they made a good looking game.
Well, Dave, where does that put today's topic? Was it a breakout title for the console?
No, not in the slightest. It's not even for a console. It's not-
Well, was it a? Then I guess let's find out because I couldn't have even told you that.
That's why it's obscure. Rob, we've talked before about how there was a thriving what's called a demo scene across Europe in the late 80s and early 90s when we covered the early history of DICE, the studio behind Battlefield, and the history of Remedy, the studio that created Max Payne and Alan Wake. The demo scene, if you don't remember, was this hyper creative underground where programmers, musicians, and digital artists kind of all come together to squeeze impossible effects out of computers that really shouldn't have been able to handle them. We know, in part of that conversation, it's a very European creative culture. We don't really have a demo scene here in the United States, but we did have it all the way across Europe. And Denmark, for purposes of our story today, had its own strong share of all that demo scene talent. In 1992, two of its standout Amiga demo groups, the Silence and the Cryonics, decided that they were going to take the skills that they honed in all their demo competitions and channel them into full-fledged game development. So together, they formed a new studio called Xerinx, operating out of Copenhagen. True to the demo scene roots, Xerinx immediately set out to push hardware far beyond expectations. Their first game, called Subterranea for the Sega Mega Drive, featured physics driven movement, smooth collision handling, and unusually high quality audio, all built using custom tools that the team created themselves because they didn't even have an official Sega development kit at the time. While they were making Subterranea, the entire studio relocated from Copenhagen to Boston to work more closely alongside their publisher, a company called Scavenger Incorporated. Xerox followed Subterranea with a game called Red Zone in 1994, which was a technical showpiece of sorts, packed with rotating backgrounds, zoom effects, vector graphics, and even some full motion video on Sega Genesis hardware. Again, their demo scene, there were hackers and artists that were, programmers made to get the most out of everything they could, and that was no different with their console games. After these, later on, they created a game called Scorcher, which they made for the PC and the Sega Saturn. Their technical ability was so impressive that Sega featured their rendering engine in a promotional video for one of their peripherals called the Sega 32X. But the studio's fate was tied to its publisher. When Scavenger collapsed in 1998 during a legal dispute with a company called GT Interactive, Xerox dissolved with it. Rather than scatter into the wind, the team all returned to Denmark, and they reformed in Denmark as a studio called Retelmoto. It was essentially the same studio under a new name, the same core members, plus there was some additional talent that they had kind of scouted from another Scavenger affiliated demo group, which was called Lemon. But that studio, Redomoto, never got the chance to release a game. Before they could move into full production, they struck a partnership with Nordisk Film, which was one of Denmark's largest media companies. And Nordisk wasn't just any entertainment company. We may not know about it. It was founded in 1906. It is the oldest continuously active film studio in the world at the moment, and the fourth oldest overall film studio, period. The idea of such a long running, historically significant film studio stepping into video game development was kind of a major moment for the Danish entertainment industry. Both sides wanted shared ownership of this partnership, of this venture. So instead of Nordisk just flat out acquiring the studio, the two entities agreed to form a completely new development house altogether. That joint venture became IO Interactive, which was founded in September of 1998. Now, looking back, it's really easy to assume that IO Interactive always set out to make a stealth classic. Today, the Hitman formula feels natural. You know, you slip into disguises, you manipulate routines, you isolate targets. It feels so in place that you kind of assume it was there all along. But none of that existed at the beginning. In fact, IO didn't even plan to make Hitman Codename 47. Their first real plan was to make an MMO. When the studio launched in 1998, it launched with just 7 full-time employees, and they had this ambition to build original character driven games, namely their dream project, which was a large scale fantasy MMO called Rex Dominus. But Nordisk was nervous about funding something so big, large scale MMO, for a brand new studio. As lead designer Jacob Anderson later recalled, one Nordisk marketing executive urged them to, quote unquote, prove themselves with a simple shooter first. So, you know, half the money, half the decisions. With that being said, IO changed direction. Now, in the earliest storyboards, Hitman didn't look like Hitman at all. It looked more like a Hong Kong action film. A stylish assassin diving over tables, glass exploding around him, bullets spraying everywhere. The inspirations were pretty unmistakable. Hard boiled, the killer, Rob, that signature John Woo ballet of violence.
John who?
John Woo.
Oh.
Woo.
Okay.
It was intended to be quick, flashy, and much easier to ship than a full blown MMO. Now, another shift in this process happened when IO realized how difficult it would be to secure console development kits as a new studio. So, right off the bat, with this in mind, they moved development straight to the PC. Right as we know, in this time period, 3D accelerators were really quickly transforming what PCs were capable of. And frankly, that environment where technology was moving fast and people were tripping over one another to show that they were the best at doing something with nothing, at taking advantage of all this new technology, that was just catnip for developers that grew up in the demo scene, frankly. So just as they had done at Xerinx, IO approached the project by building technology first, and that technology became what we know as the Glacier Engine. Glacier wasn't just a renderer. The team built an entire workflow. They had a visual editor, a scripting language for its artificial intelligence, advanced skeletal animation for synth collision handling, automatic pathfinding, 3D sound tools, localization systems, and really tight control version integration. It was literally an entirely full-fledged engine at a time when that really wasn't, there weren't many. Yeah, this is a time period where we had Unreal. This is a time period where we had Quake. I mean, there were other engines. It had their early tech for Doom. Everyone was doing it, but they were all doing it in islands unto themselves. And frankly, the fact that they were each able to do it is room. It's cause for celebration. It's impressive that they all did it. The Glacier Engine gave IO the flexibility to build big systemic levels where NPCs would react dynamically to the player. And then came a breakthrough, the thing that turned a simple shooter into something far more interesting. Because it was a shooter and killing was at the core of the game, IO Interactive didn't want canned death animations. They began experimenting with real time inverse kinematics to make bodies fall dynamically. That's a funny way of saying ragdoll system, right? Early
Hmm.
prototypes, they ran terribly slowly until one programmer kind of figured out how to fake the expensive physics and make it work efficiently, and it ended up being one of the earliest advanced ragdoll systems in a commercial game. So, in an era whereas enemies were collapsing in pre-scripted stiff animations, IO's bodies were reacting to wounds, reacting to momentum, and reacting to the environment. They would tumble downstairs, they would fold over railings, and they would just land in awkward heaps. It was technically impressive for the time. That grabbed the attention of Eidos Interactive, particularly a producer from Eidos named Jonas Enneroth. Enneroth had worked on games like Thief and Deus Ex, both of which we have covered episodes on. Those are games that emphasized player choice and systemic design. To him, the ragdoll physics weren't just visual flair, he saw them as a gateway to a different kind of gameplay. Bodies could now be dragged and hidden, their placement could create tension, death had consequences that mattered. So they negotiated, and after 6 months of negotiation, IO signed with Eidos, and Jonas joined as executive producer as part of that agreement. With Jonas came a key creative shift. Let's tone down the John Woo spectacle and explore something a little more methodical, more calculated, more stealth driven. He was taking what he had learned from games like Deus Ex, from games like Thief, which is one of the first 3D stealth based games, and bringing that knowledge to what IO is making here. And that's kind of when the studio realized they weren't making a simple shooter anymore. As they kept experimenting with these new concepts, they were slowly figuring out what really genuinely made this new game tick. And it wasn't just one thing per se, it was this odd little cocktail of systems that all came together, that all bounced off of each other in interesting ways. At its core, of course, you did have the action, the shooting, close quarters fighting, picking the right weapons for whatever chaos you were about to walk into, but that really worked best when it was paired with stealth in these environments. You could slip into disguises, sneak through hostile territory, and hide bodies before anyone stumbled across any of your killing handiwork. And then before you even set off for this thing, there was a planning side to things. You could study a briefing, choose a loadout, and actually think through your infiltration route before you even stepped foot into a mission. This all came together as like puzzle elements. You would watch guard routines, you would read the behavior of the NPCs, you would look at it and study it and figure out the cleanest way to solve a situation without just blowing the whole plan apart. All of these little pieces overlapped and fed into one another. And the studio didn't know it, this team didn't know at the time, but even here in the beginning, they were basically sketching out the DNA that still defines Hitman to this day. Now, the first missions were set in Hong Kong. These were carried over from those early shootout driven storyboards, the John Woo type levels. They really just took the same levels and turned them into these stealth environments. IO built these huge state of the art levels for the time. They were bustling markets and nightclubs and restaurants, and they even had hand animated details like realistic aquarium destruction.
Ooh.
I
Okay.
know, isn't that kind of cool? You say ooh, and someone's like ooh, but if you're not into games the same way. Everyone's different, right? And one thing that I appreciate, that I know you appreciate from that, is those stupid little details.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's interesting.
it's immersion, right? Like if you shoot a glass mug and it shatters, that's immersion. But if you shoot it and it just bounces off like it's a wall, then you still realize you're in a video game more so than before. So all those little details like that are very important. After Hong Kong, the game moves to Colombia, where Agent 47, the main character, hunts a drug lord in a clear homage to Scarface. Then it goes to Hungary. There's a mission inside a hotel inspired by a Budapest hotel. Eventually, that story looped back to a lab where Agent 47 was created, spoiler alert, and that kind of culminates in a B movie showdown with the sinister doctor who created you and like an army of clones. It was a stealth game that was also dramatic and pulpy and really wildly different. That the ending was wildly different in a way that was so different from earlier missions that it almost acts as a reminder that IO was kind of still figuring out what Hitman was supposed to be, even as they were like wrapping up development and frankly just preparing to release Hitman to the world. It was just a continuous work in progress. You know, Rob, Hitman is all about precision, planning every move, every detail, every outcome. It kind of reminds me of how easy it is to plan and execute a podcast when you've got all the right tools.
Are you saying that podcasting can be as smooth as one of Agent 47's missions?
Exactly. And that's why I use Zencaster. It's an all in one podcasting platform that makes recording effortless. Just log in from your browser, hit record, and you're instantly capturing studio quality audio and up to 4K video with no complicated setup or spy grade tech required.
But what if something goes wrong? Even 47 had backup plans.
Well, it's a good thing Zencaster does too. Its multi layered backups keep your recording safe even if your connection drops. You'll never lose a take, no matter what goes down.
What about editing? Do I need a silencer for all those awkward pauses?
No, not at all. Zencaster's post production handles that automatically. Removes background noise, trims filler words, balances your audio. You'll sound sharp and professional every single time.
But once the mission's complete, how do I get the results out to the world?
Well, that's maybe one of the best parts. Zencaster helps you distribute your podcast to all the major platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, all from one dashboard. Record, polish, publish. It's simply that efficient.
So it sounds like podcasting, but without the cover identities and briefcases. Okay, I kind of dig it. How can our listeners get started?
Just go to Zencaster, zencastr.com/pricing and use our offer code, all one word, memory card lane, for 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experience I do for all of my podcasting needs here on our podcast. And it's definitely time you shared your story.
So if you've been planning your own creative mission, grab that discount and make it happen. No disguise is required.
That's right. Head over to Zencaster, use our offer code, memory card lane, and you can get 30% off the first month.
All right, Dave. Let's slip back into the shadows of IO Interactive.
When Hitman Codename 47 finally launched at the tail end here in November of 2000, 25 years ago, it didn't land with the immediate universal praise that you might expect for the start of what now is a pretty notable, I would almost say legendary franchise. Reviews, frankly, were all over the map. Metacritic has it sitting in that above average, but let's say divisive space. And critics at the time, I mean, at any time, to be fair, weren't shy about pointing out its faults. Jim Preston at Next Gen called it a deeply flawed masterpiece, a phrase that probably still perfectly captures some Hitman games to this day.
Yeah.
GamePro praised its atmosphere and tension, calling it a captivating experience, as long as you weren't expecting a run and gun Rambo type game. Others, like Game Zone, admired its ambition but raised eyebrows at its violence and difficulty. And yet, the game kind of slowly sold, quietly, steadily, realistically better than anyone expected for something that at the time was this experimental. It eventually earned a silver award in the UK for crossing 100,000 sales. And within its first decade, to be fair, as the other games came to release, people were buying it. It did push past 500,000 units. That's not bad for a PC only game that released in the beginning of the century. To be fair,
No, not at all. That's pretty good.
that by no means are astronomical numbers, but it was absolutely enough to validate IO Interactive's vision and convince their publisher Eidos that this strange, methodical stealth sandbox hybrid of a game deserved another shot. Codename 47 didn't arrive perfectly formed, but it did arrive with enough promise to keep the lights on and enough ambition to spark something bigger. So, as soon as the dust settled, IO began the work of shaping that raw idea into something sharper, broader, and more confident. And what followed is a stretch of years where the series expanded its reach and returned to its beginnings of what a clearer version of what Hitman could be. And that's why I wanted to kind of look at the entire trilogy, because realistically, the origins of Hitman aren't in just the first game, Hitman Codename 47. They're very much in the original three games. They are a beginning series, a refinement, and then a reboot of sorts, which we'll get to in just a second. But it's really the three games in tandem that made Hitman into what it is today. I That's not even the right statement, because I think the game that came after it is the one that the series really took out in. But if these three games hadn't laid the groundwork, we might not have ever gotten to that one, which we're not covering today. It's Blood Money for anyone that's familiar with the series, which, to be fair, was my introduction to the series. Fantastic game, by the way. What Codename 47 started, Hitman 2, Silent Assassin really perfected, right? When Hitman 2 returned when Hitman 2 came in 2002 and IO Interactive returned to shelves with Hitman 2, you could really feel that they had learned a lot in the 2 years since the first game had come out. The controls were smoother, the AI was more clear, and the stealth systems were just more readable, more straightforward, more player friendly. They had added saving mid mission, which was something that the first one didn't have. That was a major complaint for the first one, and that really meant that players could like experiment and not have to really fear a misstep that would take them to the very beginning. Most importantly, though, Silent Assassin really took the ideas that Codename 47 introduced: disguises, open ended routes, large social spaces, and really transformed them into something that was more polished, more approachable, and much more memorable as a result. You know, when the critics got their hands on it, it pretty much got better reviews because they improved on everything. Metacritic for this one sits at 85, 87, depending on what platform you look at it for. All of the systems that people felt were inaccessible in the first one, they improved on. And people responded to those changes. This one was also a commercial success. It sold more than 3.7 million copies as of 2009. So in that same by 2009, the first one had sold 500,000. This one had sold 3.7, and that makes it is the best selling Hitman in this original series. Prior to rebooting it in I think 2016. A lot to go with Hitman 2 on this one. It also brought Hitman into consoles. This one, whereas the first one was just a PC based game, this one wasn't just released for PC. This one came out on PlayStation 2, Windows, and Xbox initially. It eventually came to the GameCube, and then it was re released for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 in a Hitman HD trilogy. So this one has seen other platforms. That's another reason why the original really only had, you know, 500,000 and the new one has whatchamacallits, because this one has more platforms, I guess, is the best way. Because the original was only PC and this one had console releases too. Did I say that right? Sure.
Sure, Dave.
You know what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say.
I do.
Hitman 2 Silent Assassin is kind of the moment that Hitman stopped being an interesting experiment and really started to become a true franchise. Again, improved on everything. People responded really well to it. It sold really well. And so that team got to continue working in the Hitman series. And that brought us in 2004 Hitman Contracts. And Hitman Contracts is very unique. Hitman Contracts I wanted to talk about today for a very specific reason, more so than Hitman 2 Silent Assassin. And that would be because Hitman Contracts did something that was really unusual for games in its time. And that is that it revisited the original. It is technically, it serves as both a remake of the original in Hitman Codename 47 and as a sequel to Hitman 2 Silent Assassin. But for me, I don't see it as much as a remake or a remaster, but more as a reimagining. They brought back several missions from Codename 47 with new layouts, better lightning. My god, I can't talk today. With new layouts, better lighting, more atmospheric storytelling, and frankly, like, their engine had just improved by then. So it was a better looking game. It played better, and all the things that we want new games to do. It doesn't replace Codename 47, but it really refines the story that it told. It sands down the rough edges, it tightens the pacing, and it presents the early story that fans from the beginning in Codename 47 had, presents the story in a new way that everyone could appreciate. For many players, Contracts was their first exposure to the origins of Agent 47, because people that had started at Hitman 2, the console generation, probably had not played the PC only version. And so, like, you have this whole generation of gamers that were introduced to the series for Hitman 2, and now they were finally getting to go back to learn Hitman's origin story, which is really what 47 told. And so it reimagined that origin story, and it really laid the emotional and frankly mechanical groundwork for everything that followed afterwards. Together, in my opinion, these three games, the ambitious prototype, a polished sequel, and an atmospheric retelling, really formed the blueprints for the entire series. Codename 47 gave Hitman its identity, Silent Assassin gave it an audience, and Contracts returned back to its mythology. Contracts, for to its credit, didn't rate as well as Hitman 2. Just, can't strike gold every time. People still loved it. It still sold well, but it definitely, I think, was hampered by the fact that it didn't improve much on what the previous game did. When you go from Codename 47 to Silent Assassin, there was a big improvement, and Contracts was largely a retelling of Codename 47 in the same engine, similar engine as Hitman 2. So, it people loved it or they just said, hey, we just made the same game in a different engine or an improved engine type deal. So it got mixed reviews, doesn't sit as high critically on the list as its previous one. But I think it's important because it rebooted the series in a way. It really laid some foundations by which IO Interactive would build one of the most enduring, and now I would argue like influential stealth sandbox franchises in all of gaming history. I don't know if there's anything that does it as good as its current iteration does. Once the original trilogy established Hitman's identity, IO Interactive spent the next 2 decades expanding and experimenting and reinventing the franchise in ways that I don't think anyone could have predicted here in 2000, 2004. Blood Money came a couple years later in 2006, instantly became a fan favorite. Like I said, that was my introduction to the series. It pushed the concept of a sandbox design to new heights with more living reactive levels and an incredibly unmistakable style. I still love it's got a very iconic scene that anyone who's played Blood Money is going to know. And the music, it does the Ave Maria when they're in like a someone's funeral, but it's not Codename, it's not Hitman's funeral. He's alive and the funeral is just there to bring the people he wants to kill together type deal. Iconic. I hope I'm remembering that right. I haven't played it in like 20 years. Someone's going to be like, no, that's not what happened. Crap. The next game in the series, Hitman Absolution, came out in 2012, and that took a more cinematic approach to the series, not quite as much of the open sandbox that Blood Money came and brought to. And that really divided the fan base. Some longtime fans didn't like what they felt was a step back from what they liked about the series, that sandbox. But the cinematic approach brought some fans of cinematic shooters that were popular at the time, the Max Paynes of the world, for instance. It brought the Hitman series to them, and so it brought more people into it. And then, frankly, it really came into its own with the modern iteration, which is Hitman 2016, and that started what we call the World of Assassination era. Instead of a single release, the studio shifted to a live evolving structure that was built around like a sandbox, a huge sandbox. This evolving world built around replayability and mastery and deeply layered level design. It has 3 games, the World of Assassination era, and over 3 games they really perfected the idea of what's called a murder playground. They turned each mission into a carefully tuned machine full of possibilities, disguises accidents, and absurd opportunities. And frankly, that's kind of what I've always liked about the Hitman series. You've probably seen, you said you've seen content, but has it been like gameplay content or meme content? Because it's popular for that too.
I'm pretty sure it was meme content. Yeah, I don't know that any of my friends or anything played this one, so I'm trying to recall. I maybe I saw a little bit of gameplay, but it was definitely mostly memes.
No, we've both watched one of your friends. You know how we get together in our Discord chat, we stream games to each other. We
You say
definitely
so.
we definitely watched one of your friends play Hitman because I remember him trying to throw a homing briefcase to murder someone, and we were having a lot of fun watching him try to like guide this briefcase to murder someone.
It does not ring a bell to me whatsoever, Dave, but I'll take your word for it.
All right. The thing with Hitman, what makes it so what always makes it fun for me is the same thing that makes it infuriating for me. Like Rob, and longtime listeners of our show know I'm not a stealth person. I'm Leroy Jenkins. In every game I play, I want to run into the next room without any care or concern and shoot up everything like Rambo. And going slow and planning and being methodical is, at least in that style of game, not my thing. There are definitely games I'm a planner. This is not the style of game I'm a planner. What makes it fun is, as it says, now there's all these different ways you can kill someone. So you have a target, and you can disguise as a chef and poison their food, or disguise as a construction worker and rig it so a bucket falls on their head and kills them, or make it so they fall into an open manhole cover and die, or there's not one way to complete these missions. And Blood Money was kind of getting there, which is what was fun about it. But really, with the modern era, which is, there's 3 games in it that now they just sell as one big package. It really perfected that concept. You can play these games however you want it. Even the Leroy Jenkins method. If you just want to run and shoot things and turn everyone with a gun into your enemy, sure, you could do that. It's not as fun as like setting up these Final Destination type situations to kill people. That's why people love these games, to get to do crazy stuff. Is it Blood Money or Modern one? I think one of the modern ones has like a theater, and I killed someone with a nail gun because the theater was under construction. Like, there's all sorts of just ways to do it. They treat World of Assassination as a live service game in a lot of ways. It had ongoing seasonal content, it has elusive limited time targets, has escalation contracts, and eventually they released a mode called Freelancer, which is a roguelike inspired mode that kind of redefines how players can experience Hitman. And then let's be frank too. Outside of the main series, Hitman breached into it's this whole multimedia universe. There are novels, there are comics. Rob, have you seen either of the Hitman films? There's a pair of them, isn't there?
I have not seen them. I couldn't tell you how many there were.
Never seen any of the Hitman films.
Nope.
That's just crazy talk. There was one. Maybe there's only one. 2007, Timothy Oliphant.
I don't know, man. You're the movie guy.
I think there's 2 of them. I think there's one in 2000, no, two, 2007 Hitman and 2015 Hitman. There's 2 of them. I forgot about the second one. Second one's got, who's Hitman in the second one? Great Google Moodle. Why can't I remember anything? Anything. I'm old. That's true. Oh yeah, the second one was supposed to have Paul Walker as the agent, but he died before it could happen. That's right. Anyway, you got movies, you got mobile adaptations, there's spin-off games, Hitman Sniper and Hitman Go, that take the spirit of Hitman and reimagine it in completely different genres. And then the studio itself still exists. They're not working on a Hitman game for the first time probably ever at the moment. They were tapped to develop a game in the Bond universe called Project 007, and supposedly they're working on an untitled online fantasy RPG. Maybe they're finally making Rex Dominus. Who knows? But while they're doing that, they're still doing updates to the World of Assassination, which is kind of cool. Really interestingly, because there's not much more to Hitman's story. With World of Assassination, it's an ongoing thing. It's we may not hear as much about Agent 47, but he's not dormant by any stretch of the imagination because they're adding on to that whole live sandbox. The original studio, Redomoto, they never got to make a game before because they became IO Interactive, but they've come back. They developed a game, an online shooter called Heroes and Generals in 2016, and it ran for nearly a decade, run by a lot of those original, like the Xerinx, the Redo team. A lot of them had went back to Redomoto to kind of finally get a chance to build their own identity. Well, IO Interactive went to, and took the Hitman series and kind of ran with it. I guess what's interesting is they were just this scrappy demo scene crew in Copenhagen, and they evolved into 2 different studios, built a franchise that shaped an entire genre, because one could argue that Hitman is probably the most popular stealth game on the market next to Metal Gear. Those are I think those are a big 2. Am I missing a stealth genre game that you can think of? I mean, we've covered Thief before, but I don't think that's nearly as big as Metal Gear or Hitman.
Yeah, I couldn't think of any other, man. That's
Yeah.
it's just not my type of game either. So
Yeah. So I mean, this gave a lot to the stealth genre and the entire Hitman series, and it all started back here with these trilogy, Codename 47, Silent Assassin, and Contracts. All right, I'm rambling. I think that's enough on Hitman for today. If today's episode has you thinking about how stealth games evolve, how they hide their rules in the shadows, and reward patience over firepower. We've kind of explored that concept in other episodes too. As I said, we've dug into Thief. That was back in episode 223, which gave us the birth of first person stealth games. In episode 98, we traced how Metal Gear turned sneaking into a storytelling tool. And in episode 247, we looked at how Perfect Dark blended gadgets, infiltration, and sci fi espionage into its own little unique flavor of stealth action. You can, of course, find these episodes anywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, or by visiting our website at www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, what else can people find on our website?
you can find a calendar of our future episode topics. You can find a link to our Discord where you can come chat with Dave and I about episode topics or other gaming related topics or whatever. You never know. You can find a link to our Patreon where you can help support us and get access to ad free and unedited versions of all of our episodes. And you can find links to our social media where I am on several platforms as Rob_O_Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is Wrong. Each week, we'll tell you one story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game, a person, a technology, a console, a place. That sums it all up. We'll tell you each story. We hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. When we sit down to research new topics every week, we get excited when we find out new things to share with you. It's a fantastic cycle of learning, teaching, teaching, learning. And in celebration of that cycle, we like to talk about our takeaways, our turkaways each week.
So, Dave, what's your big takeaway for this week?
Oh, you beat me to the punch today. I forgot that Hitman was PC only in the beginning. Completely forgot that Codename 47 PC only game even existed, to be honest with you. So it was interesting learning about that. And since Blood Money was my introduction, I don't really have familiarity with this original trilogy. So getting to tell the story where we go from Codename 47 to the consoles and Hitman 2, and then back to a retelling of the original game in Contracts, I think is a really interesting full circle for a beginning to the franchise, frankly. What'd you learn?
Um, I think that for me, it's just an interesting fact that IO Interactive was originally going to make an MMO, and then they're like, nah, let's make a shooter first, and then happened to create Hitman, which I mean was a pretty popular game series.
Yeah,
Um,
they
it's
just
just interesting to think that they went from MMO, a large scale fantasy MMO, nonetheless, like fantasy to stealth shooter. That's like
fantasy.
night and day. It's such a very vastly different concept.
Yeah, well, fantasy to action shooter, and then Eidos got involved and kind of tempered those expectations down, and it evolved from that into a stealth shooter. But yeah, I mean, it's from completely from point A to point Z with nothing in between.
Like, hey, let's make something like WoW or like I don't know, Lord of the Rings Online. Nah, let's shoot some people, but be stealthy.
I know that's exactly.
Or not, who cares? Let's do it either way. But like it's just it's one of those things like, we hear about people having ideas and then like them sticking to those ideas and making some changes here and there, but this is like a complete 180. And it's kind of crazy that it was like, we didn't even think of this. We just made it happen.
Yeah,
And it
for sure.
became such a big thing.
All right, well, that'll sum it up for the story of Hitman. Before I wrap it up and look into next week, is there anything you'd like to add to today's episode?
I'll take one moment to say thank you so much to everyone for listening. It means the world to have you along with us as we talk about all of these fun games, whether it be your style or not. Obviously, stealth is not for Dave and I, but hopefully you enjoy it, or at very least enjoy listening to us. And if not, well, thank you for listening anyway. It helps our views
Yeah,
or
I know,
listens.
right?
So thank you. We appreciate you.
People letting me ramble on for an hour a week. Ugh. That brings us to the end of our time with Agent 47's earliest years, the moment when a handful of demoscene veterans, a hesitant publisher, and a notion to build a simple shooter accidentally all came together to birth one of gaming's most enduring identities. I think it's one of our more unique ones. What I find most striking is how Hitman's legacy isn't really defined by spectacle or power fantasies like a lot of games, but by intention, by stillness, by the quiet spaces it demands between planning and action. Even today, in the world of assassination, when IO's worlds are bigger, louder, and more flexible than ever, that core idea remains unchanged. The thrill of watching possibility unfold, knowing that patience can be as powerful as a bullet. And maybe that's why the series endures, because in a medium obsessed with speed, Hitman still rewards those willing to slow down, look closely, and think a few steps ahead. The same studio that once squeezed miracles out of Amiga code is now shaping worlds far bigger than anything they imagined in 1998. Proof that creativity doesn't disappear, it just evolves. Next week, we're trading the calculated precision of Hitman Codename 47 for the ambitious missteps of the Atari Jaguar. Released in 1993, this self proclaimed 64 bit system promised to revolutionize gaming, but struggled against its competitors due to complex hardware, a limited library, and marketing missteps. Despite its commercial failure, the Jaguar has carved out its own little unique place in gaming history. So join us as we explore its aspirations, its challenges, and said legacy on next week's unconventional trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Baby dim bop 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 doo wop boo doo wop boo doo wop boo doo wow.